That's
if you, and that's where it comes like politeness and like, and kindness to express yourself and trying to establish like a decent approach to people that have like much more experience than you. I mean, for me, the worst thing ever is like when somebody approaches you, you give an answer and they start like defending what they did.
yeah.
Dude, I mean, it just like throws me like in a situation where, because I see myself when I started and I wasn't like that. I mean, I would have dreamed to actually contact somebody like, I was working on real production and have an answer, so I would never dare at that time to actually be like, well, I did this because, like, honestly, I don't care why you did this. I'm telling you my opinion, so if you're trying to undermine what I said at the light of like your skills, that's like, it makes me in a kind of like uncomfortable situation. And I'm sure you
Yeah.
have the same experiences at some point, right?
You might have seen his work in productions such as NVIDIA RTX video cards real-time ray tracing cinematics, Elder Scrolls, and Batman Arkham Knight cinematics from Blur Studios, and some impressive Prime 1 collectible statues. He worked at Blur Studios, Riot Games, and is currently a lead character artist at NVIDIA. Meet Alessandro Baldasseroni. In conversation with Alessandro, we explored production artist profession, how communication and feedback changed in age of social media, and more. I've been a big fan of Alessandro's work for quite some time now, and it was an absolute blast to chat with him. Strap yourself in, and let's go. Everyone is so different, Like it's something you realize when you talk with people all the time.
And
it's like how different they are.
Yeah, and it also depends, like, I believe, like, what kind of like background you come from. I come from a background which is basically production artist. So I'm. It's not that I like it, but it's just like my past. It's just my the way I evolve in the industry. I always had to take care of a lot of like technical stuff. I don't like it. I hate it, actually. I would like to be you when I'm an adult,
Right.
But I can't, because my bill depends on like technical things, and sometimes I don't know. I just like I have differences with people that don't really like phased as much as me when it comes to this stuff, don't understand the implication of some request. And I'm not saying it's same in general, but yeah, it's mostly that.
Yeah, it's just, I guess it depends on like what kind of, well, I guess it's like all of that is shaped by your personality, right? I mean, what drives you and what do you want to do, and then B, what kind of environment you're in, and like what do you kind of got used to doing.
Totally.
With your body of work. I've noticed that with I remember learning matte painting back in the days. I think 2007, 2008. I actually picked up matte painting from this project that guys over at Framestore were doing as a personal film, The Hunt for Gollum. It was like a Lord of the Rings fan film, and they got like 10 like 20 artists from around the world just to like, hey, let's do this fun picture, right?
Gotcha.
And I picked up matte painting back then, and it dramatically changed the way I work, like dramatically, from sketching and trying to be realistic to like actually making for the first time recognizable work,
Yeah, totally. Totally.
So I can totally see how your production background affects that. What made you go into production or go into art in general? Like,
Oh,
where
I
did
mean,
those started for you?
it was totally random. I mean, my education, my studies has nothing to do with like art or computer graphic. Actually, I study science of information, which is basically
Mhm.
like computer programming. I mean, I come from a generation. I'm old. I'm like 40, almost like 47. So my generation, it was trendy to do like computer science. It's like I saw the internet like booming basically.
Right.
And then I studied math, like pure math. So I don't know what was the idea. Maybe become like a math professor or something like that. I mean, I was okay. I was just like not very. It wasn't really my vocation. It was just like trendy, and a lot of people like suggest me to do that. And then I did the military service. And when I come back, I was completely demotivated. So I got a job. I
Mm.
got a job as a CAD operator. Like I'm talking about AutoCAD in this
Right.
company that was making like electric outlets or something like that. And that's where I started to just like play with 3D programs. And I mean, I think I was inclined to do art. I was okay, and
Hmm.
an okay kid when I was like drawing. But it was always like dark. I mean, those years were like 1998, something like that.
Right.
So I started playing with 3D programs, especially like 3D Studio, and doing things that were kind of like make sense to me, like small objects, like props, and it was intoxicating. And there was not much around, no tutorials. I mean, almost
No.
nothing.
Remember those handbooks from?
And it was good and bad. Good because good was that?
Do you remember those
No, I'm saying
handbooks?
like it was good and bad.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Handbooks.
Sorry, it was breaking up for a
Oh,
second. Um. No. Yeah. Keep going. Sorry, it was breaking up. I asked a question, and I think that's sort of like when in the
handbooks.
breakup.
I didn't have any handbooks at the time.
No. Yeah. It was the 3ds
Uh,
Max would have like their sort of like tutorial material embedded,
yeah.
kind of like a handbook, and you would read like,
Oh,
hey,
yeah,
how do
yeah,
I
yeah.
do that? Yeah.
Yeah, it was mostly like the learning curve at the time was totally not organic at all. It was just like, hey, I want to do a chain. Let's see how we do it. And then you go online and you don't find anything.
Yeah. Nothing was online.
But just no tutorial at the time. I mean, there was some, but they were like written by just like people like you that somehow like figure things out. But there was
Yeah.
no industry people that were actually posting. Even if there were video games at that time, like 3D video games were kind of like uh, you know booming at the time. But there was no people in the industry just like sharing the stuff. It was nothing like that. It was just like private user posting. There were like few 3D sites as like reference, like 3D Cafe. I'm talking about like prehistoric stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, it was intoxicating. I was like spending so much time in my little room at home in Italy, and like just playing and playing and practicing. And the good thing is that it was pretty easy to impress people.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was pretty easy. Like you
Hmm.
show a bunch of like primitives like put together, and people are like, oh my god. And you were feeling like stupidly like creative. And you were in a way, but
Yeah.
it was pioneeristic.
Did you
Um,
ever get to get those Noman DVDs like when they started coming out?
oh no, that was already too. I mean, when they were starting coming out, I was already working, kind of like involved in working for studios. So at that
Yeah.
point, I was definitely interested. I was like, let's see what's happening here. But at that time, I was like, confident that the content in the actual DVD would not really like shock me or surprise me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was definitely good stuff. It was definitely good stuff. So that was my beginning. Just like just like diving into the software, try to figure out what the buttons are for, and it was somehow like formative because it was giving you a lot of like problem solving type of attitude.
Hmm.
So when you don't have like resources around you, you really try to experiment and experiment. I mean, you spend a lot of time, but at the same
Yeah.
time, you don't rely to an external source for like figuring out your problems. And I think
Yeah.
I still maintain that kind of attitude even today, in the sense that, to me, going on YouTube or asking on forums is really like one of the last things that I do. I really try to even like spend a good amount of time in the software first and see if I can figure it out,
Hmm.
and then like ask for information. I think it's valuable in a way, even today, not to just, because
Yeah.
a lot of students, a lot of people actually approaches me sometime and ask like, hey, how do I do this? And I'm like, wow, this is so basic. You didn't even try to make a simple effort to,
No effort.
yeah, no effort whatsoever. And it's, I understand, like the bar is much higher today. It is kind of like sense of like things that need to be done fast. I mean, there is a value in how fast you are.
Right.
I understand it is a fast-pacing society, and even our industry is becoming like more fast-paced. But hey, there's still like sometimes it's just like, hey, sit down. Nobody's gonna chase you. Just do this effort to explore like just the surrounding, before like
Yeah.
ask for help.
One of the, maybe it's a frustrating thing, or maybe not, depending on like how you look at it. But when I see kids that are learning, doing exactly what you're talking about, like for artists, like for concept artists, the question like you're talking about be like, hey, what brush do you use?
Yeah, that's yeah.
It's where you, if you Google, like literally if you Google that, you get an answer right away, and the lack of effort doing that. I almost sometimes think that person who's not willing to put that effort in the first place going to have a real hard time when it comes to actually learning complicated things and getting into like production mode, where sometimes you're not going to have answers to anything you're trying to
Right.
find out, and you're going to have to sit down and figure it out by yourself. That happens more often in production,
Yeah,
actually.
not only that, but you're never even gonna be in the situation where you're gonna innovate,
Yeah,
when you're gonna
that's a good
find
point.
like, when you're gonna be like a leader in terms of like, workflows and,
Yeah. I do remember those times when you didn't have online resources, though. And, I guess the closest you could get was asking a question on forums and then hoping that someone who's registered would first notice the post.
yeah,
Because normally, it's like right now, if you get a lot of likes, then you get a lot of recognition and a lot of people commenting. If no one knows who you are, no one cares, and it was
that's
pretty
true.
similar back in the days too. You would post something, not to the degree as right now. You would still have like a lot of people that were trying to help all the time, but generally, you would post something and some on hope that someone knew what the hell you're talking about in the first place, and then try
Yeah,
to help you out
yeah,
if they knew how to do it, which was
totally.
very rare.
I don't know you, but I kind of miss those days. Like, you know what I miss the most is like the sense of like critique. I mean, when you were
Hmm.
like posting something in those days, you are basically really exposed to critique, and some of the critiques are actually harsh. But
Oh yeah.
these days it's just a showcase. It's just
Yeah.
like I mean, you will, if you post something, nobody's ever gonna say something about it in terms of like, oh, I will do this thing better. I mean, these days, if somebody does that on somebody's wall or on Instagram, it's like, hey, this guy is a douche. And
Right.
maybe he has a point, maybe it's like, but it never happens anymore. And it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that good people and good artists are not coming out today, but they, I mean, the confidence that people have is somehow like biased by the fact that
Hmm.
they don't receive any sort of like harsh critic or anything that is actually like makes them question what they do or the way they do it.
That's true. Yeah, I agree on this 100%. Like the sense of critique back then during forums times were much stronger than right now. And yeah, there's definitely a sense where someone comments, and the funniest part is like when someone comments and like really wants to give you genuine critique,
It's
and
just
then
like,
someone
yeah,
else comments and it's like, hey, stop hating.
Yeah. I mean, like these days, if you want critique, you need to ask for critique. We are to the
Yeah,
point where if you explicitly want somebody to say something about your work that is not like awesome or put a like, you just have to be like, hey, I want to critique.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way to put it these days. It's very
And that's
politically
sometimes not enough either, like sometimes you just have to pony up and buy into a mentorship of an artist that you admire, because
right.
that's the only, in most cases, going to be the only way you're going to actually get the proper, you know critique at this point.
Yeah, but I still believe in like politeness and kindness. I mean, like
Right.
I receive some emails, and sometimes honestly I don't have the time to respond, especially when the question is like very articulated and it involves like more than like maybe more than 1 hour of my time. These days for me
Right.
it's kind of hard because my time is precious at 47, I believe. So but sometimes when people is like polite and is generally like expressing themselves in the right way, I feel like, well, this person like needs an answer, like because it's
Yeah.
like because the attitude is not assuming is not assuming anything. It's not like I mean, let's face it, these days, like with social media, you can literally ping almost anyone in the industry.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
have like such an easy access. I mean, getting an answer is another matter. It's like just like contacting these people is so much easier compared to like 15 years ago.
Oh
And
yeah.
that somehow makes you feel like, hey, it's easy, but it's not really, like, because people have their life. People like come from different background, and so don't take for granted that just because you can connect, you are entitled to an answer.
That's
But if you and that's where it comes like politeness and like and kindness to express
mhm.
yourself and trying to establish like a decent approach to people that have like much more experience than I mean, for me, the worst thing ever is like when somebody approaches you, you give an answer and they start like defending what they did.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I mean, it just like throws me like in a situation where, because I see myself when I started, and I wasn't like that. I mean, I would have dreamed to actually contact somebody like, you know, I was working on real production and have an answer. So I would never dare at that time to actually be like, well, I did this because, like, honestly, I don't care why you did this. I'm telling you my opinion. So if you're trying to undermine what I said at the light of like your skills, that's like, it makes me in a kind of like uncomfortable situation. And I'm sure you
Yeah.
had the same experiences at some point, right?
I think, what is that phrase? I think there is a psychological phrase for this. There's something called emotional. I think it's emotional intelligence.
Mm.
It's like recognizing what people can feel and think, and how to actually approach a person. Like how to approach a person to as a human being, not as a weirdo or a robot or something.
Right, correct.
Like I think that's an actual skill, and I feel like a lot of people might just miss that, might not have enough opportunity to learn emotional intelligence, like how to react and how to respond, um, in order to, or like how to even ask in order to get the answer, instead of like putting a person in an uncomfortable spot, because like as you said, hey, like this is a random person that is contacting you, and what it really is, like if you look at it objectively, it's this: whoever writes you an email or private message or something, what they are doing is they are inquiring to have a chunk of your time, which usually means also money, because like, maybe not in the monetary sense, but all of us value time, right?
Right.
Like this is the time you're gonna put into responding. It's the time you could put into playing with your kids. It's the time you could put into making extra money on the side. It's the time you could just like, hey, maybe I want to play video games and relax, all that stuff. Like it all just depends on like how busy we are. But yeah, I feel, yeah, like sometimes people just gonna write, and then they expect that this is going to be a conversation, which is like, yeah, that's a wrong expectation to have if you're approaching a person you don't know, because you don't know what kind of situation they are in, like what is the mood, all of those things, right?
Right. No,
But yeah,
I
like
was kind of
someone
like,
defending is like the frustrating part. It's like,
I
come
remember
on,
this guy.
man.
I remember this guy in particular. I mean, I will never forget this because he was like it's just like somebody approaches you and start complimenting you. And then he goes like, "Oh, by the way, have you ever noticed like your surname could be read as like Baldasseroni? What do you think about that?" And this was like the end of his like conversation,
What?
and I was like, "Wow."
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
That's exactly
amazing.
the answer, right?
Yeah, no. Then I was so curious that I started looking at the Facebook profile just to understand like to have a glimpse of like this kind of like persona, and he's obviously like very young, you know. And
Yeah.
I don't know, for him maybe it was like funny, maybe for him it was just like a natural way of like approaching people that from every
Yeah,
perspective
but
they
you
are
don't
like
do that though.
seniors. Yeah, I know, senior than you. But I responded to this guy. I responded, and of course, like when it comes to my last day, I just I don't know. It really has no meaning in Italian. I understand. I understood there for the first time how it can be
Yeah.
read here in the US. But I was like, okay, well, that's okay, cool.
Man, you're a very patient person.
No, because I was so shocked. I was like, wow, like, actually, is he serious? Is he like fucking around with me? No, it was actually like he meant well, but just like the expression was just like, wow.
Yeah. I'm not young. Like I don't, when I look at TikTok, I feel really old, you know?
And I can't do that.
And I feel, and that's maybe more of a question than assumption. Maybe younger people, when they approach each other and talk to each other, they kind of assume that they're in a closer relationship than they really are with the random person that they don't know.
I just think
Maybe that's the case.
I just think it's like it just comes to social media. How
Yeah.
easy it is to connect on social media. It just comes to that, I believe.
Because I remember watching I watch a bunch of podcasts, and some of them are comedian podcasts that are really popular, like really popular comedians that expose themselves and they're constantly talking, and they have their friends around and they talk shit to one another all the time, right? And then they say like, hey, I'm in the comedy store or something, and then this random ass person that I don't know comes over and like insults me, because like, hey, your friend did that. It's like,
Right.
Hey, I'm not your friend. Don't do that. Like, you don't talk to people like that you don't know,
Yeah.
So and maybe it's like a little bit of that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
Well, yeah.
No, but yeah, I'm similar to you. I get messages. I try to reply to those that I know I can reply right away, or like over time. But if I get like a wall of text that will like I have to spend 20 minutes to read it, it's like no, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
Even though I like sometimes really want to help, and some of those walls of text are like genuinely like cry for help. It's just like with everything going on, like how much time I can spend on certain things,
Sure.
When you work, when you have family, it's like it's almost like always a gamble between, okay, this is the amount of effort and time I can spend to this without compromising everything else that I do. And eventually you run out of time. And that's really what it is,
That's
especially
true.
if you're like, especially when you have a family, because then it's like, all right, I can spend an hour replying to this long ass email that requires me to sit and think and not give you an offhand answer. Or I could, take my daughter for a walk, or,
Sure.
play Legos or something, and give that valuable time to people that matter to me, not a random person that I don't know. But
Exactly. And that's where it comes like the importance of like how you approach somebody instead of like asking right away,
Yeah, I think, I've been talking about this on the podcast all the time. It comes up every now and then, actually, but just like going on conventions usually is like the best way to connect with someone. Right now it's kind of, I'm actually curious what it's going to be right now, because with everything going on, everyone forgot about COVID.
Right.
It's like, oh, it doesn't exist anymore,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well,
I wonder what's going to happen.
We as an industry, like, I believe that a fair good amount of people in our industry is like lucky enough to be able to work from home. So at least on that perspective, we are extremely lucky, extremely like privileged compared to a lot of people actually struggling that have to actually physically be somewhere, or the people who lost their jobs. Like, I can only imagine. I feel like super privileged. I was working for NVIDIA from home as well before.
Right.
But honestly, in a situation like this, it's much more advantageous, Yeah.
Yeah. How do you think it's gonna? I mean, that's something I ask a lot recently. But I personally feel that this is a cornerstone for a lot of companies that assume that they need to have people on site, and then now they are realizing that that was a giant waste of resources to do things that way.
I have friends, obviously, like you in the industry, and all I hear is like, I talk to them. I'm like, hey, how things are going? Are you guys able to deliver? I was like, and they're like, yeah, it works. I mean, there are like some hiccups, some things that needs to be smoothed out. But you know what? It's working like surprisingly well. I have people that I know that works at like Infinity Ward rather than Blur Studio or Riot, and they're all saying like, well, things are like fine, things are like working. So I can see like a foreseeable like future where more and more people actually will work from home. Definitely is like a meet up only for special occasions, Of course, like it then depends like what you specifically do. There are still some people that needs to be on site, for the nature of their job. But for people like me making assets, and I believe even for people like you doing like concept work and art direction, it's definitely doable. And I mean, I definitely expect like more and more of these kind of like situations to happen in the future.
Yeah, I remember reading this book. It's called Remote, and I was reading it when I was commuting. I actually, picked up one of my jobs. One of my recent jobs this year was it was basically a communication job, like a commute job. I made an exception on the project that I worked with. I worked with a production designer before, and I decided to make an exception for him because, like, hey, like this is one of my favorite people I ever worked with, and it would be fun to sort of like reconnect and do the project together again. So that's basically, sort of like the premise of why I decided after like 6 years of basically working from home, hey, like maybe commute. And it was a good change too, just like a good change of speed, change of pace for me as well. Like just getting to be in the studio environment and realizing that I hate being in the studio environment. Eventually.
What do you hate the most? Because I've been working from on a studio for like most of my life, and only in the past like 1 year and a half, I had this like home working experience. And I was at the point at the studio when I was like, I'm so done with like having people around and like office culture and all that stuff,
Yeah.
I don't know how it was for you, but yeah.
Just quickly, the book I'm talking about, it's called Remote Office Not Required by Jason Fried and David Hansen. Well, commute was a giant issue for me. Commute was a giant, especially LA. It's oh my god.
Yeah.
I need to move out from this town. It's impossible to live here, like for reals.
Yeah, if your commute is hard, I guess it's a big toll on you. I mean, luckily I never had like big commutes, but yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, in LA, anywhere further than 5 miles is a big commute.
Yeah.
So I did this for a couple of months, and by the end of it, I was like I was on the edge of literally going to production office and saying like, hey man, like I love working with you, but if I commute one more time, I'm gonna blow up,
How much was your commute?
It was anywhere from like 45 minutes to an hour one way. So it's like for LA, it's not terrible.
No,
but when you start adding this together, it's like 40 hours a month in the car.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And I hate wasting time, like I'd rather waste time watching YouTube videos or something,
No, the time
than
the
doing
time in the
this.
car is never productive. Like, I mean, some people say like, well, why don't you listen to a podcast? But like, yeah, I don't know.
You gotta in LA. You gotta pay attention.
Yeah,
There's so many bad drivers. You have to pay attention.
Don't make me talk about it, but whatever. I don't know. Yeah.
But yeah, I was listening to that book, and it was kind of like, why am I? It was like a confirmation bias kind of thing for me. It's like, I agree, yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah, like every chapter. It's like, yeah, you guys are on point, yeah, exactly. And meanwhile, I'm sitting in the car.
Yeah.
It's like, fucking traffic. What the hell?
So since you are a veteran of like working from home, like you never had like any cabin fever type of like experiences, or because sometimes I feel like, well, you know, it's not that I miss some people, but sometimes I need to see some people, just for like, you know, yeah.
How long? I mean, you've been working mostly in the studio, right? Most of your career.
All my career, definitely, like always been working in office, you know, surrounded by people. And you know, most of the time you don't interact with these people. You have like your earphones
exactly.
on, like but still, like those moments of like, you know, lunch break, rather than, you know, those like breaks where you have like nice conversation or not so nice conversation, that's somehow like important, you know. So when I started working from home, I was like, finally, I'm done with like seeing people that I don't like. I'm done with like small talking. I'm done with like pretending to be interested in what.
Right.
But after a while, I started like playing with my mind, and I was like, okay, I need to have lunch break with somebody. You know, I don't know if it's the same for you, but after a while, for me, it was like, okay, I need to see people.
I'm more introvert. I feel. I have to interact with people every now and then. Like I feel that I need to, but that's it. It's not like I need it all the time.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so you can stay like inside for like days without like not seeing people.
Yeah, pretty much.
You don't have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it's like, to me, I mean, ask any of my friends, like when you ask like Eitan or Shadi or, you know, some others like Aaron, like mostly my Naughty Dog friend. I don't have that many friends too. Like I just realized, not now, but just generally, like I do have.
Well, you live in LA, so it's not surprising.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. Like you live in a town that is packed with people and you have no friends, because I mean, I guess it all depends on like how you approach it, right? Because there are people here that have giant pools of friendships and acquaintances and whatnot, you know?
Yeah.
But I feel, to me, it's like, unless it's a person that I really click with and, you know, we have a lot of things in common, like I don't feel a need to have a conversation with people, you know? Like it's not like I need to talk.
I understand.
You know?
I understand.
And on the other hand, also like the podcast itself kind of bridges that problem too, because, you know, at the end of the day, I get to talk with people on the podcast too, you know?
Right.
And sort of now it's like ahead of the curve, social distancing, you know?
Right. Plus, like maybe I'm wrong, but we are both Europeans, so I don't know. Maybe our way of like intent sociality is a little bit different than here.
Right. 100%.
So I mean, I was surprised when I came here. I was like, wow, people are so friendly. Like, because it's so easy to start a conversation here, generally speaking. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that, you know. But sometimes I realize that the huge amount of like small talking doesn't really produce any sort of like meaningful connection at the end of the day, you know, which is the opposite in where I come from. Like, you know, especially people in Milan, let's say Milan, not in Italy in general, but in Milan, like it's kind of like hard to make a conversation sometimes with strangers. But at the same time, when you breach in, basically you're gonna be like fairly sure that these people are gonna stay in your life. But here for me it's been actually the opposite, you know. That's why I don't value anymore like small conversation, and it's not the sum of like small conversation for me here in the US or LA that makes like meaningful relationship in the long run. That's not been my experience.
Do you think that's a typical? That's just LA in general? Because LA is like when you.
Yeah, well, I don't know, because I've been living here for 13 years, so LA it's my biggest US experience. I can't talk for the rest of the US. I've been told that people on the East Coast are different, are closer to actually where I come from. They are more blunt, more like direct, but I don't know.
I think it's the weather that does it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, the cultural difference is giant. It's giant.
It is. Yeah. Like, I mean, where I come from, nobody says hello on the street. Nobody like makes eye contact and say hello on the street, But here it happens.
Yeah.
And
it happens. Yeah, it's true.
And he always kind of like weird me out in the beginning, and then I'm like, okay, you are in LA, it's fine, This is not.
There's something interesting you said though, like in Italy, and I would say Poland is very, very similar to that as well. Like getting into a conversation with someone you don't know is very difficult.
Yeah.
But once you click, like those becomes like a lot of times, or more often than not, they become actual, friendships. That and you get that connection built over time, and you become friends with person. Versus like, I think it's a LA specific thing, because like if you. I've been to a bunch of road trips, and anywhere outside of LA is basically night and day in terms of like how people interact to one another.
What do you think it comes from?
I think it's this town is fake. It's very fake. Like everyone kind of tries to make it here, and I think the only thing you realize over time when you live here is that the amount of productivity and creativity that you have around you is very inspiring, and you can make a lot of friendships here if you're lucky doing that, and you get a lot of opportunities also. But I feel like this town is basically littered with opportunists and people who want to show that their lives are better than yours. That was the first thing that I started to realize when since I've been living here.
Right.
Like a lot of people put up that shell of what their lives are versus what their lives really are. Yeah. It's almost like a real time version of social media.
It's like confessing what you really do for a living. It's kind of like a taboo question here sometimes to ask what you do for a living, Yeah. Because I don't know, in Italy, an example is normal in the beginning of a conversation to ask like, hey, what do you do for a living? It's very normal,
Yeah.
But here
in LA, if you're not an actor or writer, then something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Why did you come here then?
I kind of understood here when you ask somebody what they do for a living, it's not inappropriate, but somehow it has this kind of like undertone of like judging. So as a result, the people who you ask to tend to actually embellish what they do and not saying the truth,
Yeah.
In my country, an example, it's like totally normal to say I'm unemployed or I'm in between jobs. But here it's always like, oh, I'm doing this, but it's also doing that and blah blah blah. And then when you dig enough, you're like, okay, this guy is like not doing pretty much like anything. There's always like this trend to actually embellish or amplify what you're actually doing for the fear of like being judged or not like consider,
Yeah, I feel like everyone in this town, or not everyone, but a lot of people in this town are role playing what they imagine their lives to be.
Right. Yeah. If you live here long enough, you're gonna see that.
Yeah, you can get meaningful relationships here for sure.
Totally.
I feel like
it just takes time.
Yeah, I feel like the entertainment industry and artists in general here are very friendly in general. It's like, again, like I guess closest to compare would be like the comedy, environment where, I think LA is one of the first places, and it's mostly because of Joe Rogan, one of the first places where comedians as a community help one another, and I feel you have a lot of that here with artists as well. But there's a price tag related to it. It's impossibly expensive compared to anywhere else. Yeah,
it is really expensive. Yes,
it's a weird town. I've been here for like, how long you've been in LA?
13 years.
13 years. I've been here for 10 years. So when you moved to LA, did you move from Italy or?
Yeah, straight away from Milan. Yes.
What made you move here?
Well, because I got basically Blur Studio hired me, and so they offered me a visa and they flew me over. And I was back in 2007.
Got it.
I didn't know anything about US, and I never been to the US before, and it was, of course, like, as you can imagine, like such a big like cultural shock and lifestyle change. I mean, it's still like Western society, Western world, but there was a lot of like, trying to reimagine your life. Let's put it this way.
Was there any like I specifically remember certain like small things that were culturally or just generally very different than Western Europe? Because
I'm still learning.
Right. Because I moved from Germany. I worked at Crytek for like 4.5 years.
Oh, cool.
Before moving here. One of the first thing I've noticed that was like, what the hell? Like this makes no sense whatsoever was the toilet stalls and the gap between the door and the wall. It's like literally, I might as well just leave the door open,
I wasn't shocked as much as that, but mostly about like I don't know, we are getting like too much detail here, but basically like the amount of water in the toilet for me was outrageous compared to Italy. I was like, why there is so much like water?
Yeah, why? Like makes no sense.
I don't know. It's just, different habits.
Because the splash is a...
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you got it, right?
I got it. Yeah.
The gaps in the stall. Yeah, I agree with that. But for some reason in my mind, I don't know. Maybe that's a situation in Italy as well. I don't know. Yeah.
Like maybe you want to have a conversation with someone in the meantime, and get that eye contact. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
Absolutely.
No, but the cultural differences were definitely big for me. I moved here with family. Did you move here alone or with family as well?
With me, it was like relatively easier because I was by myself.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Like once you when you don't have any attachments. I mean, you obviously have family in Italy.
Yes,
I assume. So that's one thing. But like when you have a family with kids and whatnot. I didn't have kids when I moved here, so it was easier on that term. But like you have to pay attention to your closest ones as well. So
it's fun as well, I guess, like to just like share your discoveries with somebody that you know from your own country.
Yeah.
I didn't have this luxury, but sometimes I was feeling like, wow, if I had like somebody Italian to talk about this, that would be cool. Yeah.
There's definitely that, but there's also like consideration to like, hey, I mean, it's an experience for me, but you have to consider other person's feelings too at this point too.
Sure.
Like what's their outlook on this as well. And, so there is more, it's more layered and complex when you actually have to share it with someone. But I agree, like sharing it with someone also brings the benefit of like, hey, you're experiencing
your own language.
Yeah, exactly. Like it makes it far easier because you don't feel like you're isolated completely from your own culture, I had actually that when I moved from Poland to Germany. I felt very, very alone, like for the first few months, even though, it was an awesome group of people I worked with, like really fun people, really fun to interact. And we would go out for lunch and dinners all the time.
Yeah.
And you would make friendships really, really easily. But it was like not speaking in your own language and then, sort of like adjusting to cultural differences. And it's almost coming back to that thing when like people reach out to you and act like weirdly randomly. And it's like, what the hell? Like, I don't even know you.
It's like
what is this thing?
Like kissing on the cheeks is like super common in Italy.
Right.
I remember here the first time I tried with somebody, they were like, "Whoa," and they were just like hugging me, because here like the hugging is the equivalent of the kissing of the cheeks in Italy. I'm talking
Yeah.
like male to female, not guy to guy. But I
Right.
was like, wow, I'm perceived like a sexual predator right now. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, it was back in the days. Now I learned, but it was like 10 years ago. I got this reaction from a coworker. Actually, she was like, no, just hugging. I was like, okay, sure, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but generally speaking, it's never been traumatic for me. It was just like, okay, this is different. This is like something that I need to get accustomed to. But it was fine. It was generally fine. I only have like gratitude for what this like country gave me, to be honest. And it's sad. It's sad, honestly. I don't want to get political, but honestly, it's like sad to see the trajectory, because I've been living like here like 13 years. So I see what I consider like Americans are capable of, and seeing like the trajectory of where actually this like country is like spiraling. I mean, for me, it's like it's very sad. I come from a country where, you know, I never got like a big respect for like politicians, especially the ones that we have now, like the time with Berlusconi. And I was thinking like,
I remember
yeah,
Berlusconi,
exactly. Like
his
when I came here,
sex parties and shit.
exactly.
Like, what the
When I
fuck?
came here, everybody was giving me shit, and I was feeling like, well, and most of the people around me, they were just like joking with me, and they were like, you Italians, how can you have a guy like that? I was like, well, and I was thinking, yes, we have this guy because we are Italians, and this will never happen in America. And here
Never
you go,
say never.
election of 2016, and you have what you have, So I felt sad.
I think
I felt genuinely sad about it, because I was like, wow, this can't happen here. You can't. Yeah.
Up until recently, I paid zero attention to politics, like literally zero. Like 2016, it was the last time when I was actually paying attention to what's going on, and then I was like, you know what, that's enough for me. I'm out of this. I cannot vote yet. I'm not gonna be engaging in any of that because it's just a giant waste of time. But yeah, recently I don't want to go deep into like specific situations. I think a lot of that. I have my personal opinions about what's going on, but I don't think it's the right time to share any of that. I think in general, my biggest concern that I've noticed over past couple of months is how the world events and country events have exposed how polarized this country has become politically, and how people cannot see through that at all. Like, like when I talk with people, I don't care whether they voted for left or right. That doesn't matter to me. What matters is like what kind of person they are.
Right.
Their political views have nothing to like. That's it's your business. Like, it's fine. We can have differences in terms of. I can have differences with people. Like, I don't care if what's their view on specific subjects, unless it's like a subject that specifically relates to me. Then I don't want to have like a say to like, hey, you should do that instead. It's like, nah, you're a different person. You have different personality. You have a different approach to life. You might have a different upbringing, different history. Like, there's a lot of factors that come into the way you think.
Totally.
And one of the things that never works, like never ever works, is arguing. Like, arguing will never solve a problem. And especially, and this is the most concerning part, is people go to a length of like being aggressive, calling out, and the whole cancel culture idea of like, hey, like you disagree with me, I'll destroy you. That's I know that I've my family lived through that in communism.
Right.
But it was like people were not destroyed socially. People were just disappearing because of it.
It was a physical thing.
Right. It was literally, if you didn't follow the narrative, you are going to disappear and no one's going to know where you are. That's basically what it was. And I feel with the polarization and how loosely people look at things like one of the most impressive things to me about America is the freedom of speech, the First Amendment. It's by far the pillar of this country. No other country has that. Like you could look. I mean, you know this from experience too. Like Italy and in Europe, they quote unquote have free speech until you say something that you shouldn't, and then you get punished for it.
Well, I wish some people will get more punished in Italy for what they say, because these days is exactly like here. Honestly, you can say whatever you want. There are no consequences. It's just
but you get the point. Like here in the US, you can say pretty much, outside of like literally, causing like calls for violence, like, hey, theater is on fire, things that are blandly calling for violence or disruption. You can say anything you want.
I think I agree with what you say. I mean, it's a great thing. I just believe that there are some dogmas still, some like idea, like principles that
it becomes tribal, right?
No. Some things that should already be established. I mean, like in example, I mean, it's kind of like controversial, but there is like this debate if it's like fair to let people talking about hate and like white supremacy like talk. An example, and here is possible. Here is definitely possible. Well, in these cases, I have a personal opinion about it, and my opinion is that no, it shouldn't be possible, because it should already be like certified, assumed, granted that having this kind of like conversations lead to something that we don't want to see, especially in a country like America. But the freedom of speech grant them like, a voice, basically, and then it's left to whoever like listen to actually make an opinion out of it. The problem is that if you reach enough young people with like, a not like completely formed mind, you can actually recruit a lot of people from the wrong reason. So it's kind of like, I mean, it's a great thing that they have here, but sometimes I feel like it should be modulated to what we are.
I know what you mean.
To what we already established, like freedom of speech for people that like incite to like Nazi ideals of like racism. It's never something that we should take for granted.
Yeah, I mean, I have almost opposite opinion than you.
No, but that's fine. But that's.
But I see your point, though.
I want to listen.
I mean, to me, it's like I see exactly a point that you have, that there's, and the problem is not necessarily the idea of being able to talk freely. I feel it's more the fact that the social media allows you to basically make more connections than ever, and then influence people. And I think it's the biggest part is the tribalism of it all. People these days are very tribal in general. Like they believe in dogma. Like this is like, okay, if you're left and right, for instance, right? Like if you say I'm on the left, then everyone assumes all the best things and all the worst things about you. Right. They don't know you. Like, you just said I'm more towards that, and then they assume, they just plaster you with, you are this and this, and it's exactly same to the right side, right? Like, hey, I'm more on the conservative side, and then they plaster you like, oh, you're this. Like, no, man, like it's not black and white. People are like vastly different, People flip their ideas all the time and think differently. I think that the problem is the lack of conversation and the idea that you have to belong to a group. That's where it all deteriorates to me. And I can see an argument to say like, hey, like maybe those damaging ideas with the current, climate could be more erosive than anything else. But yeah, I don't know. It's we're in the weird predicament in general. I feel like I see what you said. Like when you see like where this country is spiraling down to, I feel people like starting to miss the point of like what makes America.
Right.
Why this country is very special.
Well, I believe that generally speaking, in most like situation, everything comes from the top, So
Yeah, but
when the
you
leader,
you vote for the top, right? Like, and people don't vote. That's another thing. Like, people complain and scream and shout, but
yeah,
they don't go. They don't vote.
it's important. It's definitely important.
Yeah.
It's definitely important.
How many percent of people voted last election? It was 20, 25%.
I don't know. I don't
You have
remember.
you have at least 2/3 of the country that didn't even bother.
Right.
Right. So
I believe at this round is going to be slightly different. I'm optimistic about it, but we'll see about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
As you said, like, I don't necessarily like judge somebody because he has like political views like different than mine. I love I love the conversation. I actually have friends which actually supporters of like the current administration. I have a personal opinion about some stuff. I don't necessarily judge because of that.
Right.
But definitely, as you said, like the conversation is important. The debate is important. Even if at the end we're gonna stay on the same respective like opinions, which is most of the time what happens, it's important to talk about it. It's important to at least like ignite the flame of like debate, just to feel like a human being, just to be like, hey, let's hear what this other person has to say, and shut up when the other person is like talking. Just listen, and then you make your counter argument, which is not exactly what happens most of the time in social media. Social media just, after like 2 or 3 lines, you just like start with the insults, and it's
that's not a way to have a conversation. Like Twitter, I think Twitter is the worst.
I don't know. I don't have Twitter. I don't get it. I don't get Twitter. So yeah.
It's the worst. No, yeah, I think we agree here. Like, like I've been talking with my friends about this too. It's like, I hate it all. I hate paying attention to it, but it's just too close to home at this point.
Right.
Like I have to pay attention. Like, not even from, like, even recently, just from safety point of view, I just had to pay attention to what's going on.
Of course. Because it might affect you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never in my life been in curfew, for instance.
Oh, no, me neither.
Yeah. And I've been through like communism, or like part of my life, like the tail end of it. Yeah, it's all rotten and fucked up, and I'd rather like focus on doing work and being productive, And so hopefully this all passes, gets resolved, and people take a lesson and learn something, and that's and learn how to talk, because I think that's the part that's missing. So I don't have to pay attention to it anymore.
Yeah,
being frank and being like super egoistic about it right now.
And we're definitely lucky to be in a state that is like traditionally like liberal, So even the people that usually like meet or talk with are very like receptive to some topics, and and even our industry, generally speaking, is like most people are generally like benevolent and
Yeah,
open to
for the most, I agree. Yeah. Most of the people here are.
For the most part.
There are some crazy people here too.
Names.
Yeah, let's shame. Joking.
That's okay.
It kind of circles back to our original conversation about like people reaching out, and and how different they are, and how differently they think, and how different we are as people, as cultures. You come from, like, when you said this is the part that kind of like should light a bulb in a lot of people's heads. In your country, in Italy, it's not even, it's just cultural. It's the kiss on the cheek, things like that,
or
here
like,
hugging,
like cutting each other, like during the conversation, like talking over each other is so common in Italy, and here I did it a few times in the beginning, and I've been called out for doing that,
Yeah.
And I felt like mortified, and I mean, I can say names. She's my friend, like Z Jones. She's like an amazing character model at Brew Studio, and we were having a conversation. And
I worked with her. She was at Naughty Dog for a while.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and one time we were like discussing, I don't know, some like trivial stuff, whatever. It was not even related to work, and And I was like very passionate about it. I'm just like
Right.
gesticulating and talking over. And she was like, why are you cutting me off? I was like, whoa. I was feeling like, wow, this is like blunt. I never been addressed like that, but I understand. Now I understand her point. I was actually cutting her off. I was not even like realizing that, you know.
But sometimes it just takes time, right? Like you're from different culture and you are adjusting.
Yeah,
Same goes to like age differences too. Like
that make me rethink like my actual behavior sometimes with people. You know, I met somebody that was telling me, why are you raising your voice? And I was like, I'm not raising my voice. In my perspective, I was like just talking normally, like the same volume that I would talk in Italy, you know. But for this person, she was like, no, too much. You're being kind of like aggressive in your tone. And it was like mentally challenging, but in the end, I believe that the process was like very, very useful because it made you appreciate a lot of things that people here have compared to where I come from, and the other way around, you know. But assuming that you come from somewhere that, you know, every like habit over there is like better than here, no, that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing, because after 13 years of living here, yes, there are some aspects of like sociality that I prefer from Italy compared to here. But when I go back to my country and I see a bunch of like things that happen over there, I'm like, wow, we really need to step up, you know, in a lot of like social situations. Because one, this is rude. Second, this is rude, and so on, you know. I mean,
don't
like
you think sometimes, don't you, that's going to be a contentious question. Don't you think sometimes like when you go back, you might have like a different opinion? It's like, oh, I actually miss that rudeness. Like that spices up the conversation, makes things interesting. You know what I mean?
Let's make an example. Like you go to see a movie in Italy, and like, you know, you came late to the movies and you start like slowly like cutting the line, you know, in a very like strategic way, you know, that will never fly out here. Somebody will call you out. It's like, hey, this is the line, go back, you know. But in Italy, it's kind of like permitted. Everybody, people notice that, as long as it's not like blatantly like outrageous. Yeah, you still can do it. You know, there's still kind of like, you know, elasticity when it comes to this. But here, no. And, you know, he has some advantages, like, because in the end, you're like, wow, look at this motherfucker. He came like 30 minutes and now he's like right behind me, you know? So things like this, or, you know, well, sometimes you feel like the lack of like elasticity here. I mean, it's a country of rules and people really like try to respect them as much as possible. We have a country that have rules, but a lot of people don't care about it. So yeah, but now I see it. Now I see it. When I was living back in Italy, to me that was like normality, you know. So definitely like the experience of like living abroad enriches you a lot. Enriches you, like gives you like a broader perspective of how the world operates, you know.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, like having experience of different cultures.
Yeah, you don't know everything for sure, because I don't know what it means like to live in like East Asia, you know. And but it helps. It definitely helps to open up your mentality, you know, to be more receptive to what people have to say, and not to build like, you know, predefined dogma.
Yeah, a lot of friends that I have that are from different cultures, different countries, or are traveling a lot, they are very easy to talk with and have a conversation that actually can change minds, because they understand that people are different in general, you know.
Yeah, being exposed to diversity is always an advantage. Like, I mean, and that also like reflects like, I don't know, maybe you can support me when I say this, but even in art, in the beginning, I worked with Blur Studio for about eight years and a half. So my computer graphic world was Blur Studio. Was like Blur Studio culture, Blur Studio methodology. There was like a beta when it comes like to the art quality and the way we were doing things.
Right.
And I thought that was like, wow, it's Blur, it's great, and it's probably like the best in the industry, and blah blah blah. But then for choice and for like other like life opportunities, I had the chance to see other places, and I was like, wow, this is incredible that people here do things in this like different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no, this is wrong. This is like not efficient, blah blah blah. But then slowly you start like to see the way it works, and you're like, you know what? This is like actually an advantage, you know. So the more actually you experiment like studios, the more you see like different ways of like doing things, the more like you enrich yourself as an artist. Which doesn't mean you need to change a job every like 6 months. But even like thinking that no, Blizzard does the thing the right way, Blur the right way, like Lucasfilm the right way. No, it's not like that, you know. And it's never been it hasn't been my experience so far, you know.
Yeah. If it was that, then everything would be boring because everything would look like pretty much the same.
Yeah, every place where I went, I met somebody that somehow gave me like an insight of like doing something in a very refreshing way, or something that I didn't know, you know.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. You learn how diverse the art world is,
or even the perception on how to do specific like artistic tasks, like, you know, mindsets in terms of like, hey, I'm gonna start from this starting point instead of like, you know, this other one that for me was like taking for granted, you know.
Yeah, once you expose yourself to more people and the way they work, that definitely, like, yeah, it's almost a no-brainer. Yeah, you get to know, like, even sometimes you just realize that, like, hey, this is like a new thing. I've never been aware that you can do things in that way, like maybe approach the problem with this software or from that perspective, you know, maybe having more time is actually better or worse, you know. Unless you have that experience, actual experience doing that, you will never know what fits your mold, like what fits your perception or your preference, right? And sometimes it can reinforce you and say, like, you know what, I've experienced this. It gave me an idea of what it is. I don't like it. I prefer doing things my way. It works like that sometimes, and sometimes it's quite opposite. It's like, oh, I never knew it. I could approach the problem from this perspective, and it's actually more efficient for me, or maybe it's even more fun. You know, like maybe this new software that I've learned, you know, that didn't look like anything from my perspective until now, and until I tried it, and now it's like my new tool. You know,
totally.
Yeah.
And then like once in a while you meet people that definitely leave an impact on you, you know.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily need to be like incredibly amazing artists, but like just one specific moment in time, just like it's one of those like cathartic moment when you stop and you're like, wow, I actually learned something. And it doesn't have to be something revolutionary, but it's something that basically change your mindset from what you were before and what you are now. One thing that comes to my mind all the time, it was this time when I was very new to Blur, and I had read my experiences with Blur as a freelancer for almost like 2 years. But then I was working on this project, and it was the Simpsons ride for the Universal Studio. And it was a very, very, very little task. I had to model this like, it was like a, what is it called? Like a whale, like it was very stupid. Like it was like basically a big fish, like a whale, you know. And it was a whale in the style of the Simpsons. So they gave me the concept, and I just like eyeball it, you know. And I did like a fairly good job, and I sent it to my supervisor, which was Dan Rice at the time, and he was brutal. He was like, you did it. He was like, he basically said, you didn't even look at the concept. And I felt like so outraged, because it was such a stupid, it was literally like 5 lines, you know?
Right.
And I kept doing another revision. I sent it again, and he was like, no, this is not matching because blah, 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 blah. And at the end, we had a confrontation at his desk where he basically took my render, he overimposed on the Photoshop like line art, and he was like, see, it's not matching. And I was like, holy shit. I was thinking, holy shit, you really want me to match like line by line? Yes, that's what he wanted. And now for me, it's like, normality. But at the time, I was still, I'm not afraid to admit that I was still junior. I was not really understanding the importance of like matching some concepts when it matters. And in the case of like Simpson characters, it matters a lot because they are literally like, each character is like a bunch of like very few lines. So if you don't nail them, no, the character is not nailed. And it was
it's a different character now.
Yeah, I mean, every student these days, they go to normal, they learn this like right away. But I never went through this kind of like art education because I'm self-taught. So that for me was like a very cathartic moment. It was like humbling because I was feeling literally like I was feeling like shit. Because before that, I had an experience like working on hero characters or like Halo cinematics, like way more complex than the stupid whale, you know. But seriously, it taught me a lesson. I felt like mortified. I felt like a failure, you know. But then from that moment on, I remember that I switched. I was like, okay, this is the concept. This is my render. Overimpose, see the differences. Which is stupid. Everybody knows to do it now these days, you know.
Right.
But at the time, for me, it was a novelty, you know.
Especially if you want to match it, right? Like if that's the importance of similarity is there.
Some people say, well, a concept is a concept. A concept is an idea, and then you give your interpretation. No, that's not how it works. Like most of the time, especially in our industry, people spend a lot of time on the concept. A lot of pre-production has been made, so you can't just give an interpretation of somebody else. Intellectual.
That's an interesting point. Like I've never looked at it from that angle because I've never had to.
No, but from my perspective, it's my daily life. It's just like I literally spend time like analyzing every single line that is like on somebody else's work that comes before me. You know, because I want to. Generally speaking, if I match what somebody like you did in terms of like overimposing, I'm 90% there. I'm 90% there. There's nothing else. It can only improve, you know, in terms of like visual pleasantness, you know. But if I just give an interpretation, that's where like troubles come. That's where troubles come. That where like revision starts to kick in. That's where your self-confidence goes slowly down, like spirally down the drain, you know. Because people like the concept. Like people like the concept, and they want to see that. They want to see like at least like the main silhouette first, primary form, secondary forms, and then maybe you have some freedom for like introduce like small details, you know.
Did that change for you? I mean, you're currently at NVIDIA, and you know you've been working with Riot Games before. Did any of that change for you like more recently, where you feel like, you know, like I kind of like being on the concepting side and coming up with ideas, or maybe have that room for interpretation, or you still?
It's just my personality. I don't know. I never really been like a creator, like, you know. I never been
I was about to ask that.
See myself as a concept artist. Like I'm not sure I'm particularly like I'm not sure I lack the capabilities to do that. But I've always been very, I don't
think you do. I mean, your work is stunning. So
well, but let's put it this way. I know where I am. I'm a fairly good executioner of an idea. You know, I mean, if you give me an idea, I'm fairly confident that I can translate it in 3D pretty decently. You know, but when it comes like to actual creativity, I've always been refrains in terms of like, no, my ideas are not that like what to do, or they're like too derivative in my mind, and they're not fresh enough. So I never really like try to pursue this kind of like career.
Right.
But at the same time, I have a huge respect for concept artists, because I've been working with a lot of concept artists before, and I know the amount of effort that they put in. You know, I mean, most of them. So I respect it to the point that I'm very Nazi sometimes when it comes like to match the concept, you know, because honestly, like being very like strict to match the concept always like served me very well, as long as the concept is good. If the concept is a scribble, yes, I have much more interpretation. But usually, especially like in recent days, I've always been working with like amazingly like humbling people in terms of like skills. So I always felt like, well, I need to really like be faithful with what they were trying to convey, you know.
Is that the way? Because I'm curious, because like that's the way you talk about this, and the way you approach work is vastly different. I mean, it's almost quite opposite to what an average concept artist or illustrator would want to accept, basically, right?
What do you mean?
So like when you talk about the way you work and the way you feel like that's sort of like my thing. I like doing this specifically. It seems like almost structurally organized, that you're approaching it from the highest professional level of, I'm going to make the best out of this concept.
Yeah, because I'm a production artist. Because
Yeah.
I work with production, and in my experience, when I try to be loose, and when I try to give like my interpretation of like somebody else's work, it's never went like it's never been like profitable. Let's put it this way, you know.
Right. Okay.
So when somebody asks me to fill the gaps, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because I know that there is room for it. But honestly, like these days, like concept artists, they do things in 3D. They do like extremely accurate depiction of what they want to see. So it's the gap between what you can do and what you already have. It's limited, you know. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the way that like modern concept artists work. Most of the time, what people like me receive is almost like it's super accurate 3D models. Sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
Of course, they need to be a reward for animation, but in terms of like visual enhancement, there's not that much to do, you know. Which
I guess. No, sorry, I interrupt you. Go.
No, please.
No, I guess what I was trying to figure out is, because this is fascinating to me, you know, because like the way you talk about your work is very different than most concept artists would talk about their work. Like very different. I mean, both professional, right? I'm not questioning any of that. I guess what I'm trying to understand is like, you know, not what is like in the realm of art, in the realm of what you do, in the realm of a profession, like what is the most, what is the thing that gives you that kick? It's like, oh yeah, like I want to do this, you know? Like
actually,
I'm driven.
There is very little these days. I'm so jaded. No, no, because when I heard the kick, I was like, wow, it was like forever.
Okay, let me elaborate.
There are moments when I'm like, when I don't hate what I'm doing. Those are basically when you reach a stage where you're like, okay, this is like the idea that is in the concept, but he has his own life. This is something that a concept artist could not have done probably without spending like maybe 100 hours of like fine polishing. This is like purely what can be done in 3D with good shading and good lighting. And that's where I feel like I'm kind of like owning something, you know, because the work before that is basically tracing almost. I mean, you can have like some creativity when it comes like to details, but the good things to me, the kick, the fun comes when you're like, okay, this thing has never been done in 3D before. The look is fresh, it's new, and it's appealing. It's really appealing, and yeah, that's what really like motivates me these days. Like I had this like fun idea to do. Alex Konstad, he has this like universe of I think it's called Space Goblins or something like that. And a while ago, we were just like having a conversation. And he was saying like, hey, it would be cool if you can do like some 3D version of these ones, and they're beautiful. I mean, they're like fairly details, you know, a huge amount of like creatures. So I started doing some these days, and I was like, okay, I'm trying to match the feeling that this guy is trying to convey, but then from this moment on, this is me. And this is basically when you start like putting a bunch of like secondary and tertiary details, and then like you can do a lot of with the shading and texturing as well. And from that moment on, it's something that basically Alex can be happy with and I can be happy with. And the final result is something that in some way is unique. It's based on his
Right.
concept, but he lives on his own. That's basically
Got it.
that's basically what people. I believe that that's the feeling that a lot of like production artists have in the industry when they're like, okay, there was the concept of like Godzilla, and this is the 2D painting on the 3D paint over, whatever, and this is the final result.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see the final result, I mean, of course, it's like he has the feeling of the concept, but he lives on his own, you know.
Right.
It's probably well in this team, those kind of works, of course, like a team of people is working on it. The stuff that I do, especially recently, it's just owned by myself most of the time, you know. But I believe that that's what still gives me the energy when you get toward like the final moments when you start doing, you know, high res sculpting, texturing, and shading, when you feel like, oh, it's coming alive. Finally, it's something that it's better looking than the concept.
Right.
Point,
so in other words, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the creativity that comes from technical exploration of the idea.
It's technical exploration, but it's also something that, you know, it's visually pleasant, you know.
Right, like uncharted world of 3D, basically. Like, hey, like I've seen a realistic character renders and making like a realistic person done millions of times, but this thing is like, oh, I've never seen anyone do that.
And I believe is a trend that is kind of like, I mean, it's nothing new at all. Like everybody that approached 3D at some point of their career try to be like, oh, let's try to do Homer Simpson in 3D.
Right.
This like very, very good talented guy, Hossein Dibat, is doing this series of Simpsons character in 3D.
I think I've seen it. Yeah. Is it a caricature, like the really fucked up looking?
Well, yeah, because if you take a Simpsons character and you try to make a fairly realistic interpretation, that's what you get, right?
Didn't he do like the SpongeBob as well? That looks like, probably, you know, when you watch SpongeBob, you have and those.
You can have conversation about like the actual execution of this stuff,
right?
But you can't deny that they are somehow like, you know, catching. You know, and you're like, oh wow, I would. You can think like, oh, I would have done it like differently, but still. You admire it, because they are somehow like fresh. They are somehow like, wow, you know, boom, you know, in your face. And so that's the kind of drive I believe that some people like me have when when you're like, well, you know, it's somebody else's intellectual property, but I can try to do something, trying to make it like step up in a different realm, you know. Yeah, I mean, it's nothing new. People has always been done that, you know, from people that do like the Baby Yoda to like, you know, the 200 times that you try to do a Batman or whatever, you know.
Yeah, Baby Yoda is a new thing now. Yeah, everyone wants to do it.
Every time that, you know, you try to do a Baby Yoda, you're gonna be like, no, but mine is gonna be different. You know, mine is gonna be.
Yeah, it ends up looking the same.
Yeah, exactly, you know? Yeah, I mean, we're a sad bunch of people that do derivative stuff, you know. No, except you, but no.
I do derivative too. Like if you think about the kind of work I do, it's like they're clear inspirations where it's coming from. You know, I think it's a true to most of artists. I would say like 99% of artists they derive from.
Somebody said that like in the end, the success to be a good artist is like hide the source of your inspiration. But right. But in the end, it's
that's like, true though. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember who said that, but it stick to my mind. It's kind of like saying, you know, and I believe that it's. I don't know how you see it, but a lot of time I'm saying I'm jaded because a lot of time I see a lot of things that I see around, a lot of like derivative content that is like, it's very well looking, very, very good looking. It's very, very
it's rendered,
you know.
Yeah.
But there are very few things that stick out as like, wow, this is like fresh in every sense, you know. Mm-hmm. Intellectually fresh, like, you know, fresh in terms of like execution. It's not hard. Maybe we are going to a situation of what is it called, like singularity when it comes like to digital art production, you know.
Yeah, with the neural link.
Right.
That's where when it might start happening in AI. No, I see your point though. Like when you look at ArtStation main page, you basically have a handful of people that create a trend, and then a mass following of
Right.
let's copy that.
Yeah,
Basically speaking.
because in the end, they sell, and I mean, there's like, I mean, following an IP, generally speaking, like pays off in terms of like, you know.
Yeah, the familiarity of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, you know. And in the end, when you do that, it all comes to the execution, you know. I mean, there is no intellectual effort in doing like the next battle, almost, you know.
Yeah.
It's all about the execution, you know.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, the fan art is basically one of the hottest thing you could do if you want to grow your social media following. You know,
Yeah,
because people recognize it, people understand. Okay, I've seen this character, and you have like it's your own take on it. You know, and especially people that have very fresh take on things, that they explore the idea in their very original way. That's when it starts standing out.
do you feel like, I don't know, because I don't do concepts, so I don't even know what kind of like difficulties like you guys have to actually sell out ideas. But I was wondering if you feel like sometimes it's pretty like hard and like frustrating to sell out fresh ideas, like fresh concept that actually diverge from the actual meta, or from the actual, you know, mainstream
Right.
ideology when it comes to art.
You know what? I don't know. Like, to me, it's a very very tricky question because, like, how do I approach it? How do I approach this?
I mean, do you feel that in some situation you can be more like daring and be more like, this is what I want to do, no matter of like the constraints of this actual.
I know what you mean. I'm just thinking like how to respond to that. The way, I mean, okay, so from personal, I'll answer from a personal level and from like a general level, right? And then why in general level there is a trap to it all. So from a personal level, the way I've always been looking at what I do is like what I want to do, because like at the end of the day, whatever I wanted to do ended up bringing me the most benefits, from whether it would be like a new work offers, or like just building my own thing that I'm being recognized for, you know. And it took me years. Like I don't think I've had anything up until more recently that I would be developing that became something that people recognize me for. And I think it has to do with the familiarity of it. So for instance, you know, I've been working on Showtime universe, right?
Right.
My own like cyberpunk world.
That's
And
very
like,
recognizable.
yeah, doing like those illustrations, and then now doing short film. And I think people recognize it because I've done so much of it, and I've been doing it consistently for past 8 years basically. And I get questions like, hey, why you're still working? It's like, I like it, you know, like I just like it. Like, that's why. That's
Because
the only answer. Just because, right? It's, and I think it kind of falls under the same category as fan art in a way, because what people, when they see, okay, this is a Batman, or this is a Spider-Man, or this is like, you know, Simpsons or Adventure Time kind of recreation, they recognize the character. They don't have to spend that extra time, extra energy, and extra effort to understand what they're looking at. They understand it right away. And the only thing that's missing there is, oh, all right, so okay, so I understand what it is. Now I'm just doing my own sort of like, I'm interpreting what I'm looking at, basically. That's sort of like the basic concept of it. Now, when it comes to that specifically, so for instance, you know, I think the biggest pitfall, but also could be a benefit, is doing something to get likes and get notoriety. It can work for you and it can work against you. Like, it works for you when you're doing it looking at it from a perspective of business, meaning like you have your social media account and your goal is to, like, you know what, I know my capabilities. I'm gonna act it as, I'm almost gonna approach it from a level of, this is like work, and I'm doing it on the professional level. I'm doing fan art. I'm doing this. I'm doing recognizable things, or things that people are generally very responsive to, because I know that at the end of the day, having more following means more people are gonna see what I do, more people are gonna recognize who I am, and that might bring more work opportunities. That might make my social media to be monetizable. You know, like all of those things combined. The pitfall of it all is, like, unless you approach it professionally like that, you're gonna hate it. Like, you're gonna hate it, because if it's something you don't like doing and you're doing it for likes, and then someone doesn't like it, you're gonna be like crushed.
Yeah, you're gonna feel like terrible.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course.
I don't know. It's a weird thing, because like a lot of people think that concept artists, the way concept artists approach things, like the world building all the time, right? And I think it all depends on who's doing what at the end of the day, you know? Because like, if you're saying you're world building but you only did one concept for it, that's not world building. That's just like, I had an idea and I drew it, and that's it, you know?
Right.
That's just like, it's exactly same as writing jokes and writing novels or whatever. Like, you're just writing one thing, you're just taking a note, basically. You know, world building is when you're actually spending time to develop things and putting them together, basically speaking, you know. So I don't know, like,
so do you feel like companies today give like concept artists like a decent amount of freedom when it comes like to?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it all depends on like who is the art director or production designer. That's really what it comes down to, right? Like in film specifically, who is the director and what is the expectation? And then it trickles down to who is the production designer. Once you have those two things nailed down, I've worked with production designers that give me almost no room to explore. Like, they wanted very specific things,
right,
and we would work that way. But I also worked with production designers that would just give me only an idea, or directors that say like, here's the idea, take it and make something cool. Like, come up with, like, I'm hiring you because I've seen your work and I'm trusting the fact that you're going to come up with something that I've never seen. Or I might be thinking that this is what I want to do, but you're going to come up with something that I wasn't expecting. And I've had a couple of people like that working with, like, I've worked with a couple of people like that. Like Robert Rodriguez was one of those, like, almost like a cornerstone for me, where I literally for 4 months straight, like, this is the project that I've done with him is the project I'm probably the most proud of, that will never see the light of day. Which is crushing.
It's in your heart.
Right. But it was literally 4 months of, he would just throw a word. You know, it would work within like a specific universe, specific IP. And he would say like, do this within this world. And I would ask like, yeah, what do you want to see exactly? It's like, I don't care. Just start drawing, and whatever comes my way, I want to see what's coming my way. And we did like 100 concepts like that. And literally no notes, like, just keep going. Like, I want to see more ideas, you know? And like, just, you know, this is your playground. Like, you're a kid in the playground, go play and have fun.
Was he accepting like everything? Was he approving everything, or he was just like exploring?
Yeah, we're just like flying. I mean, it wasn't like necessarily that like all of it was amazing, right? But it was like a perfect storm of like, the setting is awesome, the approach is awesome, and also Robert is the kind of guy who, like, the way he shoots his films, for instance, and he said that, I hope I'm not paraphrasing it. I might be wrong. Double check me, fact check me on this. But I remember, and maybe that's my memory being wrong, but I remember hearing him in interviews when he says that the way he shoots the films is doing one take and that's it, most of the time. unless something goes horribly wrong, it's a one take and when we move on, right? That's just the way he shoots films.
Gotcha.
And he almost felt that way with the work we were doing together. It's like, let's just keep moving,
Right.
you know. I think we're like almost like world building, sort of like exploring and building this giant gallery of ideas that were loosely, you know, combined, you know. And I think there was a couple of notes, but every now and then, like, hey, like you know, I like sort of like where this is going. Maybe we should explore more of that, because obviously, like if you're going in a direction that is just like too weird or too conservative, that might be a you know, not a right way up to approach it too. But that was a very special project, I would say. I don't think I ever had a project like that ever again.
Mm-hmm. So yeah,
there's always limits, always, but I think there's enough freedom in some projects. It all comes down to art directors and directors, I would say.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The most freedom that I have is doing personal work, honestly.
Well, yeah, of
that's
course.
Really what it is.
Did you notice some difference, like having art directors that maybe before they were artists, so they were actually working on the field, compared to, I don't know, maybe like art directors that they were more like managing when it comes to this kind of freedom? Or
it's easier to work with person that has been doing art from a perspective, like has been art directing as an artist and being an artist before.
Interesting.
Way easier, because they understand the process better. What's up?
I would have said the other way around.
No, because like if you work with a person, and that also depends on how much experience they have. Because an unexperienced art director that was a good artist is going to be a nightmare to work with. Mm-hmm. But a person that is art director that has done it, understands like the quality of management, but also has been an artist and understands the process, is probably the best choice. Like my favorite production designers are like that. Like Darren Guilford used to be an illustrator too. He used to do concept art before. You know, a lot of people that I worked, like some of my favorite directors that I worked with, like Rupert Sanders. He's a very visual director.
Yeah,
as well.
Managing artists is always like a skill on its own, you know.
Because they understand the process, you know. Right. I think that's where it lays. Like when you don't have to impress from the first picture. They understand that when you're delivering a sketch or when you're putting like a block mesh together, right? They understand, okay, that's just a sketch. That's not the final image.
They understand the implication when they have to change things, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much? Okay, so I'm gonna throw that back at you now, and you know, so how much of your time you think you spend on personal art?
Yeah, well, it's like very, very limited. You know, my energy back in the days was like way higher than now. You know, now these days when I'm done with work, especially because I work from home, I can't do the extra mile and be like, oh no, let's do another like 4 hours in front of the computer.
Right.
I need to move I need to move to the couch, you know.
Yeah. So, and like with your
I can go out, so I need to move to the couch. So I don't know, maybe like 20 hours like a month, like, which is nothing compared to what it used to be, you know. And I have tons of projects just like started, but just there, like, you know, like a.
And what about the art directing? Like, do you feel like more structured art directors are better to work with?
Well, definitely.
In your case,
it really depends. Like, honestly, I had like both situations where I had people like managing me that they were not really like tech savvy or anything, or they didn't really have like experience as production artists, that they were like basically amazed by everything that you throw at them, you know.
Right.
But the disadvantage of this is that when they were asking changes, they were not really understanding the implication of what they were asking, because they were like, oh, this guy is fast. So if I ask him like to turn like white into black, it's gonna be like, you know. So there is that, you know. So as you said, like the best thing is like a combination of both. Somebody that work in the industry, possibly good, you know, possibly a good artist, with a bunch of years of like managing experience, because like when you manage artists, you have a lot of like things that go on. Is like we all have ego. We all have like our own like code that we want to be treated.
Yeah.
And there are some objective ways to treat people. No matter what, you have to be polite. But sometimes even the way you use your words, the way you approach somebody, the way you actually send the note to them, it means a lot. And sometimes you can be a good artist, but you can just lack those skills. And as a result, you get perceived as like not a good manager, not a good art director. It makes like the whole experience like unpleasant. So definitely, as you said, like you need some years of like training when it comes like to dealing with people, especially with artists, because they are the most like ego driven like people ever.
Yeah. We're almost circling back to original topic we started with, like with the emotional intelligence and the approach.
But it's true. I really believe that everybody seems humble in our industry, but like deep inside, they know how they value, they know where they stand compared to other people. Everybody in their own mind make some sort of like chart,
right?
Of like where they are, where they want to be, And based of that, the response from other people that give you feedback have a certain impact or not, I really believe that. I've been lucky that, in most of my careers, I never really had like people treating me bad or in like, with disrespect I had like some moments where people have been brutal about something that I deliver. That's formative too,
Yeah.
But then you reach a point in your life, in your career where, objectively you think that you can deliver a good job without being treated like like a newbie or like somebody that has no idea what she's doing. I'm not saying that everybody after a few years of the industry needs to be principal artist and just like be free to just like playing around, but
right
treating people like with intelligence, like fairness and tact, that's definitely a skill.
Yeah, I think across the board, right? Like not even just from perspective of artist and art director, but generally speaking, assume someone is intelligent, not an idiot.
Yeah. No, like definitely. I don't know you. I never been in a situation where like, actually I did. I don't want to say.
I think every single one of us has at least one.
Statistically, there are very few. And since the industry is very small, they get exposed pretty easily, usually,
Right.
So
yeah.
It's very counterproductive to be a jerk or to actually, pretend that you have like skills or qualities that you don't have, because it's very fact. It's a very like, fact-driven industry. Like if you're good, it shows. If you're not, well, it's under the eyes of everybody,
Yeah, that's true. Dude, we've been almost closing on 2 hours.
Oh yeah, I was getting hungry. So I was getting hungry. I was like, oh, why?
I figured that like we circled back nicely to the beginning of the podcast. That would be like a good point to wrap it up. Cool. I know we could talk for probably like an hour or two more. Like just seeing how the conversation is going. But I know you're busy and I'm busy myself. There's a couple of things that I need to do today. So I think it's a good moment to
Thanks a lot for having me at the time.
Dude, anytime. We didn't even talk about a lot of like your personal work at all, or like your
it doesn't matter.
career build up on any of that.
It's not that
so
relevant. I'm done.
There's like a lot of topics we could cover. So definitely would love to have you back on the podcast for sure.
Oh, thanks a lot, man. It would be my pleasure. Definitely.
All right, where can people find you? Where can people find your work?
Well, definitely on ArtStation. I have my profile, I have my website, alessandrobaldasseroni.com. Very easy.
Mm-hmm.
mean, my name and last name is not easy, but if you do a quick
I'll
search,
link it below for sure.
Yeah, and that's it.
Is there any like projects or current things that you would want to like plug in or anything like that? Or
no.
Got it. All right.
But thanks for asking. I really appreciate.
I always do. I want to make sure that you're lending your time. Yeah, you're lending your time here. So like, why not?
I mean, I'm not that super busy.
I know.
I fuck around a lot during the day. But come on, you do too, right? So
yeah, everyone does.
Yeah,
everyone does.
It was a pleasure. It was really a pleasure. It's the first time that we talk, and it was a good chat. Good chat.
My dream is like that eventually, and well, I don't know if it's a dream, but eventually like having this setting, but like an actual like small studio and invite people to like come over, like Joe Rogan style. That would be so much fun because like the conversation's better.
Like a round table,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Maybe the topic is like talking shit about things,
Yeah.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
Once it gets there, then like here's the reality. Like when you talk shit, like you have to be careful because like you are in this industry, so there's like certain things that are taboo and you shouldn't talk about. Once you get out, it's like fuck it, just let it roll. Either way, dude, fun times. I really appreciate it. It was cool getting to know you a little better. I mean, we literally missed each other when you were at Riot Games. I was actually doing some work for Riot. I've seen you there, but you were busy. I've seen you like on the floor.
I was busy
a couple of times.
That's possible.
I think you were either like with your headphones and doing some work or like on the like a side meeting, and I was like in between meetings, like walking in and out because I wasn't working on site. I was just coming in for meetings,
Gotcha.
But yeah, nice to finally actually get to talk with you and catch up and get to know you better.
How do you pronounce your name? Maciek?
Maciej.
Yeah. Maciej.
Yeah.
So the K is silent.
So it's either Maciej or Maciek.
Oh, okay, Maciek.
Yeah, Maciek. Yeah, it's either or. Like both are. It's a kind of weird name because Maciej is more like a government official name, and Maciek is exactly same thing.
I had a Polish guy next to me, one of my neighbors. Now he left, but his name was Maciek. But he told me like call me Magic. And I don't know if he was trying to be funny and I was calling him Magic. But that's why I asked if it was like the correct pronunciation. It's like Maciek. Okay.
I've heard that too. Yeah. Someone was calling me Magic.
Sorry about
weird.
that. Sorry about
No, it's all good. It's all good. I cannot complain. Complain. Anyways, anyone who's listening and enjoyed the show, you know what to do. Subscribe, leave a like. If you didn't like it, then don't do that. Leave a comment. All of that helps the show. Also, Art Cafe, it's available everywhere. It's everywhere, man. It's everywhere. It's on YouTube. It's on Spotify. It's on iTunes. It's on Google Play. It's on Stitcher, it's on Castbox, it's on SoundCloud, everywhere you want it, baby. It's all there. So, yeah, anytime you like, comment, rate the show on iTunes or anything like that, all of that helps to just gain more visibility, build this family of artists and spread the good word. That's the only reason I'm doing this. So, cool. Let's wrap it up here, man. Really fun times.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Take care, guys. Cool. We're done.